Hello and welcome to Algebra 2. Today is Tuesday, September the 15th, and our topic for the day is remainder theorem. Actually, this is going to be a two-part lesson, so we're going to write remainder theorem part 1. Great. We're going to start off with some definitions, a little bit of theory, and then we're going to dive into our examples. So, our word is remainder theorem. And the remainder theorem states that the remainder of a polynomial of a polynomial f of x divided by some factor, and we're just going to call this x minus number, where this means number, not hashtag. This means some number. When divided by x minus number is the same thing as f of that number. So, for example, if I divide, let's say, x cubed minus 3x squared plus x minus 1 over x minus 2, and I want to know what the remainder is, I'm going to set this to 0. And now, if I plug in 2, it's going to give me the remainder of this division problem. Okay? This is useful because we can say that something is a factor of a polynomial if the remainder is 0. So let's write that. We're going to say x minus number is a factor of f of x if the remainder is 0. Okay, we're going to dive into some examples now and apply this knowledge. But our biggest takeaway is if we're dividing by a factor, we can plug in that number to the original function and it will output our remainder. Pause and rewind wherever you need. Okay, we're going to call this example 1. I would definitely pause and write this out. When f of x is divided by x plus 6, okay, the remainder is 0. Okay, which condition is true about f of x? So we're going to write a couple things that we know before we check multiple choice. So, since the remainder is 0, let's write that. Since the remainder is 0, x plus 6 is indeed a factor. Further, I've got x plus 6. Let's set this to 0. Subtract 6, negative 6. So I know that when I plug in this negative 6, my output is the remainder. And then they tell us that the remainder is 0. So I know that f of negative 6 is 0. Let's check our multiple choice. Part A is looking really good. B, no. X minus 6 is a factor? No. That's because x plus 6 is a factor. So it's not B, it's not C. And the answer is almost never, ever no conclusion. Our answer is A. Pause and rewind wherever you need. Next example. Okay, this is the second type of problem we're going to deal with today. It says determine if x plus 2 is a factor of f of x. Okay, so first we're going to write our theory, our strategy out. We're going to say x plus 2 is a factor of f of x if f of negative 2 equals 0. So if we plug in negative 2 and we get 0, this is the number you plug in, and 0 is, or whatever number it is the remainder, right? If it's negative 4 is the remainder. If it's 12, 12's the remainder. We are checking to see if the remainder is 0. It will always output a number. That number is always the remainder. We are checking to see whether or not that number is 0. Okay? Why am I plugging in negative 2? Because we turn the factor into a solution and we get negative 2. So I'm going to plug it into every x that I see. All right? Let's start this down here. So f of negative 2 is negative 2 cubed plus 6 times negative 2 squared, 11 times negative 2 plus 6. I'm going to go a little quick here for the sake of time, but feel free to pause and rewind. Negative 2 cubed is negative 8. That's negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2. You always do parentheses first. Negative 2 squared is 4. 11 times negative 2 is negative 22 plus 6. Negative 8 plus 6 times 4, 24, minus 22 plus 6. So we'll just take these in order. Negative 8 plus 24 is positive 16. I still got minus 22 plus 6. 16 minus 22, negative 6 plus 6. Oh, great. It is 0. So our conclusion is, since f of negative 2 equals 0, meaning the remainder is 0, there is no remainder. So let's write that. That's a good point, actually. No remainder equals 0. They mean the same thing. If it says no remainder, it means the remainder is 0. Since f of negative 2 is 0, x plus 2 is indeed a factor of f of x. So this is our final answer here. Great, we got one more example. All right, this one looks pretty similar. Determine if b minus 7 is a factor of, and let's call this guy f of x. You can call it g of x, z of x, q of x, doesn't matter. Okay, so b minus 7, if I set this equal to 0, then I'm plugging in positive 7. So we need to test f of 7. So I'm going to plug a 7 into each b that I see. These are going to be some big numbers here, and I'm going to be using a calculator, and it's totally fine if you use a calculator for these big numbers. So I've got 7 to the 4th minus 8 times 7 cubed minus 7 squared plus 62 times 7 minus 34. Okay, 7 to the 4th is 2,401 minus 8 times 7 cubed is 343. 7 squared is 49. 62 times 7 is 434 minus 34. Great, now we're just crunching numbers, so I'll go pretty quick here. This number is 2,744. And now we're just going to plug this into a calculator. And we get negative 860. Definitely nowhere near 0. What this does mean is if I divide f of x by b minus 7, the remainder is negative 860. So our final answer is b minus 7 is not a factor of f of x. B slash c means because. B minus 7 is not a factor of x because f of 7 does not equal 0. Anything but 0, and it's not a factor. Here's our final answer. That's all for today, guys. Thanks.